Welcome to Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyers, their triumphs, and their trials. I'm Dominic, the founder and owner of Elevate Business Coaching, and with me today is
Bob Furlong of the Bullfinch Group.
Missing Briefs. What's our objective? What's it all about? Well, really, it's to explore and narrate the compelling stories or briefs of lawyers who have experienced significant challenges and successes in the business of law. What was their gap? What were they missing? What do they wish they'd known? Well, it's our pleasure today to welcome Michael Chinitz. Mike is the founder and owner of Chinitz Law, a Newton, Massachusetts-based employment law practice with an emphasis on representing executives in their transitions between jobs. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon, Dominic and Bob. Thank you for having me on.
So, Mike, you have a really interesting story and you work in a particular area of the law. So let's get started by going way back to the beginning, okay? When
Okay.
did you first decide to become an attorney?
I think it was late junior year of college at the University of Massachusetts, where I came to the realization that I did not have the math skills to go to a doctorate program in economics. My father was a PhD economist. I was thinking I'd follow in his footsteps, but I had to work way too hard to get good grades in anything into math, calculus, statistics, and the like. And um, I took one course at UMass in civil liberties that was taught in the Socratic method. Think about what's that famous show? You'll remember it more than me. The paper chase.
Oh, sure, right.
You see the Socratic method being used, which is where they call on you. You have no choice but to participate. So I was in a lecture hall where the professor would call upon you, and he was a poli-sci and lawyer, and it was really interesting. I had no lawyers in my background. I had no family members who were close and who were lawyers, no family friends. It really wasn't something that was driven, like by relationships the way most people are today.
Yeah. So you go to law school, and then at some point you make a decision of where you want to gravitate towards. How did you decide to focus on employment law?
So it's interesting. At the outset, I didn't know whether I wanted to be a litigator or I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. And in fact, I went into my first job kind of with that dilemma. And the first firm where I worked, Nutter, McLennan and Fish, now called Nutter because everyone's shortened their name, they were being flexible with me. They were, well, what do you want to do? And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I decided to take the litigation path, but with an emphasis on stuff that was related to economics. So I handled matters involving antitrust. I handled matters involving business litigation, finance related litigation, and then employment litigation. And that's where I kind of got my start in the area of employment, but not at first presenting individual executives, but more defending companies in employment litigation, kind of everything from the classic, what's called EEO or equal employment opportunity litigation, like, claims based upon discrimination to stuff like non-compete and non-restrictive covenant litigation, and then other oddball things. And I found that I really liked that sort of work. And I liked it because it wasn't as, I mean, the business stuff was cool, but the business stuff usually involved like massive teams,
Mm.
working with five, six lawyers and a few paralegals, whereas the employment stuff was more like a partner and me. And then ultimately, as I got more senior, just I would be handling the case, under one person's kind of general supervision. And what ultimately happened is I really enjoyed working with a, a gentleman by the name of Alan Rose, who at the time was, one of the more senior partners at Nutter, and he was, I think, at the time that he left, or soon before, he was the chair of the litigation department, and he left to start a firm with his son, then called Rose and Associates, and I joined them about 8 or 9 months after they formed. And so when I jumped out of Nutter to Rose and Associates, which later became Rose, Chinitz and Rose, it was a much more kind of flexible practice. You may or may not know that in large firms, there's very little representation of executives. It's like you are representing management. Not necessarily exclusively, but like most of it is that. And then when you get into a boutique, you can kind of get away with doing both sides. And so I started representing companies in employment litigation, but I also started representing executives. And more of my practice was of morphing into representing executives in a widespread, multitude of issues, anywhere, anything from, joining and leaving to, disputes and people getting caught up in big non-compete brawls and non-solicitation fights. It was a much more flexible platform because I really, within reason, charge what I wanted to charge and provide very personal service. And so I found that I really enjoyed that aspect of legal work. And at the same time, I realized litigation, has its purpose, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed being in the courtroom. I enjoyed being in the arbitration room. But it also, these cases drag on forever. And what's nice about the engagements on behalf of executives is that they can be like over and done with in like a month, too.
Mm.
You can really measure in a very concrete way what you accomplished for people, because like you either, you got them more money on their way out than they were being offered, or on the way in, you materially change the terms and conditions of their employment from what they were first being offered by way of a written employment agreement to what they ultimately signed.
Mm.
And, it was also the sort of thing where you developed relationships. Like, both of you, I'm a relationships guy. And so you develop relationships with people that keep coming back as they transition over their lives. And also they send out close friends and colleagues. As long as you did well by them, they keep coming back. And I have some clients that have been, as we all know, this where we live in an age with a lot more mobility, and it's rare to see people that like work with the same company for years. So I'll have people that keep popping up and, hey, Mike, I'm back. I need your help with this. I need your help with that. 4, 5, 6 times. And they're long-standing, friends and clients.
So if I was to play that back, like, how did you get here, right? Nobody in your family, there was no law path necessarily in your family. You weren't great at numbers, but you went to law school. You went to work at a big firm, Nutter. You did some litigation. But it sounds like, and this is interesting, you really carved a path in employment law on the executive side because, as you mentioned, many people they're typically working for management, but you've developed a nice little niche there, working with executives and all those things that you just mentioned. So I want to switch it just a little bit, right? So you've worked with Nutter, you've developed your expertise in your practice area, uh, and you go and you work at Rose, which becomes Rose and Chinitz. What were some of the key challenges that you faced now, not as a lawyer, but as a business owner, when you essentially like started your own practice? What were some of the key challenges you faced when you kind of left that big law and went either to Rose and Chinitz or just Chinitz Law?
Yeah, I'll say that first, challenges as a young rising lawyer in a large law firm were much greater than the challenges in a boutique, because those challenges were like the inflexibility of your billable rates,
Mhm.
inflexibility with respect to intake in terms of what you could do, So I actually found it very liberating when I, joined what at the time was
Mhm.
Rose Associates. Uh, Kind of the rules were obviously you had to have no legal conflicts.
Mhm.
The rules were like you can charge what you want, don't leave any money on the table.
Yeah.
Just be sure that you have the time to get the work done, and expand your kind of platform as you want to do it. And so it was actually a way to go from a situation where for me it was really hard to grow a book of business to like becoming really
Mhm.
successful. And then, in terms of at the same time working with a lot of really big companies. So I
Yeah.
had I had clients in that boutique environment, as did my partners that were like other lawyers,
Mhm.
large firms would die to have.
Yeah.
Like, Morgan Stanley, for example,
Yeah.
and Liberty Mutual, and on and on. I mean, there were my partner had a great relationship with Microsoft, and so I was doing litigation for these behemoth
Yeah.
companies at the same time that I was representing, senior execs,
Yeah.
uh, you know, uh, in their transitions.
It sounds like you had like the dream Rolodex there of corporate clients and executives within those organizations. But what I kind of heard you say there, Mike, was it was liberating when you left the larger firm, right? You had control over and more scope and more latitude. So the word that you used there was liberating. So I have a question for you, right? If you go back in time, knowing what you now know, right? What would you have done differently when it comes to starting your own firm?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Think in today's environment, like knowing what I know now, might I have uh, kind of jumped to a boutique sooner? Maybe. I mean, I learned a tremendous amount
Mhm.
at my first job. I met some, you know, really great people, and I'm still friendly with some of them today. And some of them were terrific mentors. Um, but for me, like the large firm environment was something that wasn't ideal for me. So I mean, I think that like
Mhm.
could have seen jumping into something like in like year 4 or year 5 instead of year 8, but that's not material. I mean, that
Yeah.
is not material. I mean, sometimes I look back and I say, "Oh my God, look at the success and the wealth that people have accumulated at the largest firms in the world." I had those opportunities because I did really super well in school.
Mhm.
I don't look back at that often because that also involved like a lot of sacrifices. And
Yeah.
I have 3 children, and I was able to coach all of them in multiple sports. I was able to make most, if not all, of their games and their
Hmm.
events, and I got them on skis for their third birthdays. And they're all really, really passionate about skiing now today.
Yeah.
Mm.
I may not have been able to do that in the large form.
Yeah. So the switch was liberating. If you could go back and do it all again, you really valued the experience that you got at Nutter and so on, made like tremendous contacts and experience and mentors. Maybe you'd have done it a couple of years earlier, but that's not a huge deal. But what going out and making the leap yourself, what it really did afford you was that flexibility to be able to have the type of lifestyle and the things that were important to you and how you wanted to spend your time and getting your kids on skis at a young age has been part of that. So that's great. So Bob, how about you? What other questions do you have
Well,
then
I
for
think
Mike?
about the best way to connect people with you. How do you like to be introduced? If there's an advisor that has a client with an employment issue or a family member or friend that may have watched this, what's the best way for us to connect them to you?
Well, it's funny in our new text society with my closest colleagues,
Yeah.
often a text connect, which is, it sounds so casual, informal, a little bit like too informal, but the fastest way of doing things. But look, email is totally fine. I love the emails where there's a warm introduction, just like I know that you like to do it. And then obviously you drop off after the first or second email. But when things are like moving really, really fast,
Yeah.
texting is fine, and that happens a lot, like in the evening and on weekends, just because we live in this text culture, and so that's okay. But I maintain a pretty significant presence on LinkedIn, and I have pretty high SEO for my website, although websites are arguably becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
But like LinkedIn is a great vehicle. I mean, it's amazing how people, will actually inbox you and say, "Hey, can you meet? Can we talk on Monday?" Or like that's how they look at you. That's how they find you. Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of introductions from firm partners.
Mm.
Those large firms are only representing management. I get a number of referrals from in-house counsel at large companies. It sounds kind of odd, but believe it or not, you could have an executive who gets cut loose, and the first lawyer that he or she turns to is like the general counsel of the company and says, "You have any ideas for me?"
Mm.
And then I've been fortunate to live in the same community for most of my life. I grew up in Newton, and I've been back since 96.
Mm.
And so, I get a lot of introductions from business people in Newton, supervisors, obviously, um, and college friends, law school friends, a lot of people from, yeah, I get a lot of referrals from law,
Right.
that sort of thing.
So email introduction to client or even a three-way text, depending upon urgency, those are great. And there are going to be people that watch this and go, "Oh, you know what? I've been thinking about my stuff. I really need to reach out to Mike myself." For somebody with a spontaneous outreach, what is the best way for them to contact you? What's your contact information?
So yeah, so it's Mike at chitzlawllc.com, which is pretty you know common sense. It's just like didn't adopt some you know uh, business related email address. So yeah, Mike at chitzlawllc.com, and
Yeah.
then through LinkedIn is totally fine. And
Yeah.
I don't like for there to be a lot of confidential content, even though people do that.
Sure.
It's but once you get on my email platform, obviously it's very secure. And I just dropped a bunch of dough to increase
Yeah.
the security level by about 5,000% because of where we all are. So I joined the big boys.
That's awesome.
That's great. And so, and Mike, we know each other. So folks that may be listening, right, and maybe they're not a lawyer, maybe they're not a general counsel, but maybe they are an executive, and they're thinking about, maybe I should reach out to somebody or just get some questions answered. Mike, I know you're an approachable guy. You're happy to, like, if someone's having that thought, the answer is they should probably just ping you and ping you by
Yeah.
by text, and that's the best way. You're an approachable
Yeah.
guy and don't mind spending time.
Also, I mean, I have a very, very strong Google presence. And so everything comes up on Google. I have a Google site, and I have other access through awards. I've been fortunate to get, not by paying any money, like just like
Yeah.
magazine top lawyers. So I'm there. Super lawyers, I'm there, and you can those are access points to just see the website and the platform and all that sort of thing. And I will generally give courtesy time. The challenge with that is that I tell people flat out, like, it's reckless to advise people who are non-clients based upon a 10-minute conversation. What I like to do with the courtesy consult is explain process, explain like the steps that I would take to gain more information, what my approach would be, because I think it's different than many lawyers' approach in terms of trying to facilitate agreements on things, particularly on the way out, without getting into a brawl that can be very damaging to the executive's reputation, that can really cause him or her to burn bridges. I try to avoid that at all costs. And so I'll spend time, off the
Yeah.
clock explaining the product, even though people really want answers. And I tell them that if I gave them answers based upon a 5-minute call,
Mhm.
be too good of a lawyer. It wouldn't be doing them any kind of service.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I do 1 and 1.5 hour consults at a reduced rate. And most of those consults, unless it's something that can be an issue that can be answered quickly, leads to a full-blown engagement.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do that if they're actually seeing 2 or 3 different lawyers,
Yeah.
kind of trying to get a sense of the approach of 2 or 3 different lawyers.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel good because it shows me that they're serious,
Yes.
not just trying to like kick the tires and get some free information, but they're really
Right.
serious about helping themselves
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
and spend a little bit of money to help themselves and to get, and with that time, I can look at their contract. I can ask them a lot of questions. I can give them a sense of what direction I think this is going to take. I can
Yeah.
give them a sense of whether I know people at the company they're working at, or I know they're outside lawyers, or I've had an experience with that company before, what, issues are at play and that sort of thing.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes total sense. And I like the way you said a courtesy consultant if it's more than that. Because it is. I mean, for most people, their salary, their comp is their major source of income, and certainly for a lot of those executives. But
Uh,
fascinating, and it's fascinating the area that you're in and how much goes into it and thought and so on. Were you going to say one last thing, Mike?
well, I would say losing your job has to be one of the most traumatic things, uh, other than, like illness,
Mm.
like
Mhm.
a really serious illness or some other sort of personal or family catastrophe. I
Mhm.
mean, you think about, the biggest transactions in most people's lives. They are a house purchase or sale,
Mm.
and then, a job acquisition or job loss.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
so, those are major, major events in people's lives. And I, really pride myself on taking care of those people as best I can.
Yeah. And for most people, it's something that they're going to go through hopefully once, maybe more than that. But they need a guide, and that's what you're in every day. So, Mike, thank you so much for spending some time with Bob and I today. We really appreciate it, and we'd encourage folks that if you have questions about any of the stuff that Mike's talked about today, just reach out to him. He's a very straightforward guy and easy to talk to and an expert in his field. So you've been listening today to Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyers, their triumphs, their trials. If you have an interesting story to tell about your triumphs and trials of maybe owning your own law firm, uh, or perhaps you know somebody else that has an interesting story, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. My name is Dominic Grew.
And I'm Bob Furlong.
Until we meet again.